You're listening to Season 2 of Making the Grade, the podcast exploring what's driving the declining graduation rates between funding rounds and how venture-backed software companies can scale successfully with realistic options to exit. I'm your host, Tom Glason, CEO of Scalewise, and this season, we're digging into what it really takes to scale beyond early traction, the ups and downs of the journey from 1 to 10 million in ARR, and why so many startups are struggling to make that leap. We're going to explore how to build effective go-to-market functions and hire truly stage-fit talent, how AI is reshaping go-to-market, what changes we can expect to see in 2026, and what capital-efficient scaling actually looks like in practice. All with one core question in mind: how do you build an enduring B2B SaaS business that scales sustainably, stays capital efficient, and creates real exit optionality? Expect honest conversations, hard-won insights, and practical advice you can apply straight away, because scaling can be done differently. Today's guest is someone who's lived the 2 to 10 million ARR journey multiple times. Natalie Johnson is a seasoned revenue leader who's built and rebuilt go-to-market engines across the UK and US and is now leading revenue at one of Europe's fastest scaling AI companies, Autogen AI. And if you listen to season 1 of Making the Grade, Autogen may sound familiar, as we had their founder Sean Williams on to share more about the origin story and their scaling journey. In this episode, though, we get into the realities behind successful US expansion, what goes wrong when you move too early, what changes when you get it right, and how to scale revenue without burning time, money, or teams. We also talk candidly about outbound motions that still work, evolving ICPs through the messy middle, and how AI is reshaping, but certainly not replacing, modern revenue teams. So if you're navigating the 1 to 10 million stage and thinking about US expansion, this conversation is packed with hard-earned, practical insights. So, Natalie, I have been really looking forward to this one. I'm genuinely delighted to have you on Making the Grade and to dig into, I suppose, the realities behind your success and also some of the lessons and tips for others. So, Natalie, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm very good. And thank you, Tom. That's lovely. Very, very happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Glad I could make it into season 2.
Awesome. Awesome to have you. So, one of the themes we hear over and over at Scalewise and with the founders we support is just how much scar tissue exists around US expansion. And in fact, I even have my own scar tissue on this as a CRO. You've had, I suppose, a front row seat to two very different journeys, Jacquard and now Autogen AI. So I'd just love to compare those two journeys a little bit. Maybe you can tell me, how did you approach US expansion differently across those two journeys, and what did you learn from each?
Yeah, absolutely. I know, sort of second time round now is good. Jacquard, or Phrasey as it was known previously. So I joined that business back in 2017, very early stages for that organization at the time. And that was also an AI company selling out into the marketing technology space. And we kind of went through the journey of moving into the US fairly early on. We managed to win a bit of an American flagship client for us, just a little brand called eBay, who we met, who our founders met at an event, and they were kind of willing to take a punt on us and do a bit of a pilot and get something going. And so that was really successful, and they were really happy to go public with that. So we saw that as our opportunity to really just take that and run with it and hit the US market big time. There was one competitor that we had who was based in the US, who had a completely different approach to what we were doing. So we knew we had a way in that was quite clear. So we did what I think a lot of British companies do, and we hired up a bunch of US salespeople. And we were like, this is fantastic. We're hitting the American market. And obviously that didn't work out quite to plan. Obviously, we didn't set those people up for very good success. It wasn't the right approach. You know, we were 20 people in London punching well above our weight, trying to take on America. And we brought in people who were from big, stable organizations with everything figured out. And we wanted them to BDR and book meetings and all the rest of it. So we scaled back quite quickly once we realized we'd made some mistakes there. But we learned them very fast and we made the changes that we needed to make. So yeah, our first foray didn't go very well. So what we decided to do instead was pivot entirely and just say, we're going to run it all from the UK. And let's build from the UK. And then when the time is right, we will then go back to the US and build out a team there. And this time we'll do it on the East Coast rather than the West Coast, and save a bit of the time difference. So really that then led to like the next couple of years, 2018, 2019, 2020, pre-COVID a little bit, obviously, of just spending a heck of a lot of time on planes. And I sort of based myself out in New York for a little while, and my co-founder, Victoria Pepiat, we spent a lot of time on planes, going around everywhere. Very small, lean team in the UK, BDRs, me, couple of AEs, just kind of really focusing on trying to crack America. We just went to every event we thought our customers might be. Every time we won a customer, we proved value really quickly and then really earned that right to ask for introductions and widen, get referrals in through their networks. And we just kind of went everywhere we thought our customers could and would be, and really leaned into face-to-face as much as we possibly could to really build those relationships. It landed us some really fantastic customers and some great meetings with great brands. And then COVID hit. And then we went to doing all of that off planes and demos at midnight and dealing with procurement people at 11 p.m. on the West Coast and working all hours and doing whatever it took, really. So it was pure slog, pure grind, doing it all from the UK until COVID hit. And that really kind of forced us to take the position to go, we're ready now to bring in a team. And we built a remote team in the early stages of COVID over on the East Coast. And ultimately that resulted in an office based in New York.
Gosh, there's so much to unpack in that. At what point did you decide, okay, now is the time that we should be hiring people on the ground in the US?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were a little forced into it, I would say, by COVID. I don't think we probably wouldn't have done it. We really started building the team, obviously remotely, completely at that point in sort of 2020. I think we might have waited a little bit longer, but by that point we had about 50% of our ARR coming in from North American clients. So we were pretty confident that we were certainly on the right track, and we had big hitters. We'd signed, by that point we'd signed, Netflix and Best Buy. We were just kicking off a pilot with Facebook Marketplace, for when they were still really heavily on, just building that out sort of thing, really. And Dick's Sporting Goods and all these huge, like, American retail brands in the main, and then big travel brands like Hilton hotels. So we felt really confident that we had the kind of traction that we needed. But we needed to have the boots on the ground. Obviously, we didn't know how long things were going to go on with the pandemic. And also, we were confident having that kind of 50% of our ARR coming in from the States at that point, that this is a good move to make. So that's when we started hiring up people. We hired a very small team.
And so what is your advice to companies on that journey then? Is it wait till you've got like 50% of your customers in the US? Is it something else? Are you looking for predictability, repeatability, selling remotely into that US market? Like, I just know there's so many founders that are grappling with that decision. Like, should we build from the UK? When's the time right? Like, what advice would you have to people that are thinking about that at the moment?
I think for me, it's very much that thing of like, don't rush it. Like, really ensure that you understand that you've got the right product market fit for that space, that you really understand your ICP as well. America's a big old place. Like, you can spend a lot of time going in the very, very wrong direction if you're not really clear about what you're looking for. I think you've got to get those early customers through the door, get those proof points, particularly if you're coming from the UK and Europe. You are so unknown. America is used to buying from America. They're used to working with organizations in their market, but they're very happy to see alternatives that aren't from the States. So I think you've really got to be confident that, you've got the right kind of customers that you're winning. I don't know if you'd need 50%. I think you'd maybe, you might be able to take a little risk on that sooner if you've, got some good clients coming through. You're building a good solid pipeline of things that are good for your organization that you can win. And I think as well, when you're thinking about hiring, like, it can be a really lonely place to be the only boots on the ground in a big market like America, where the rest of the team might be in London. And so you've got to be really conscious about making that attachment back to the UK or the head office, wherever it might be outside of the States, and getting that hiring really right and making that really clear, conscious effort in your hiring that this can be really isolating and that you might be really lonely and this is going to be really hard. Like, startup life's hard anyway, let alone if you're, one or two people in a market as big as America trying to push a UK brand or something. So yeah, I think it's don't rush into it. Take the right time with it. Really see that the ICP, so you're not wasting your time, because it can be a bit needle in a haystack if you're not careful and you don't know where you're focusing your attention.
That focus is so important, especially in the bigger the market, almost the narrower the focus needs to be. And as you say, you can waste a lot of time and money chasing everything out there. You and I have obviously both seen painful expansions where I think maybe where companies perhaps copy and paste a UK motion and kind of hope for the best. That was certainly the case in my situation, where we just thought our playbook in the UK could translate to the US market. The product would be fine, the buying process would be the same. But that really works, I think. And obviously we had Sean, your CEO, on season 1, and he gave us a good view of the journey that you've been on. And obviously he's now out in New York as well. How did you think about putting boots on the ground at Autogen? Did it come earlier than Phrasey? Did it come when you got to that 50%? What was the kind of sequencing of the hiring that you did out there? And how did you know this time that you were getting the timing right?
Yeah, so it had come a little bit earlier. The pace of growth at Autogen AI has been quite different in the face of the boom of AI, of course. So yeah, look, Sean being out there makes a huge difference. It really shows both to our business and externally into the market just how seriously we're taking our expansion into North America and how big of a priority that is. And Sean's move out there really, really demonstrates that. So, we've built a great team. We've taken our time. We've gone sort of piece by piece. We sort of started quite early with a really small, lean team. Again, kind of similar thing. We'd won a couple of clients early doors in America through kind of founder networks in that kind of first year where Sean was doing all the selling. And so we were able to really sort of use that to leapfrog a little bit, but we've taken our time with it. We need a different sort of product motion for the US market. We need a different go-to-market motion in the US market. We're very focused on selling into people who bid for federal contracts, for instance. So it's quite different. We've really got to lean in so heavily into federal security and all these things that just make it more complex than just being able to jump in feet first and go, great, we've got some boots on the ground.
Well, we're definitely going to come back to AI in a moment, because I'd love to explore that further with you, of course. But any like core fundamentals, like principles on that journey from 2 to 10 that either founders get wrong or, I don't know, you feel like are just best practices on that journey? Because it's a tough journey. Like 0 to 1 is also hard, right? Going from like pre-product market fit to getting to that first million. But that scaling journey, that go-to-market fit phase, that post-product market fit, is tough. Any kind of foundational principles that you've kind of lived by on your journeys when you've been doing that, that's kind of like, okay, well, this is really important to do when you're on that journey?
I think your network is critical. I think you have to be out there. You can't do this from behind a laptop in a desk in your spare room. You do need to be out. You need to be building that network. You need to be asking for those introductions, earning those referrals. And I think you've got to know the problem that you're solving for inside and out. You really, really do. And that is top down, bottom up, everybody in between. Somebody on the people team should be able to articulate the problem inside and out that you're solving for. And I think that's just absolutely key, because if you know that, you understand that intrinsically, you're learning from it, you're constantly adapting and honing in based on what you're understanding. You're really leaning into those early customers. If you think a lot of those early ones that are going to get you to that 2-3 million, they're probably going to be quite innovative organizations. The next step after that is the really hard bit, because that's when you're trying to convince people who are maybe more risk averse or just aren't convinced of the value that you're bringing. And that's the big step, getting up to that. Then, that 3 to kind of 10 is where you've got to prove that you are game changing, you're category defining, you're, whatever your product might be and how you're bringing it to market. You've got to be understanding who those people are, why they bought you in that early stage, and then how do you now convince this next tranche of people? And that all comes from those proof points, those customer stories, building that out, because you kind of go from willing to sell to anyone up to that kind of 1-2 million point to then like, okay, now we need to be able to scale this and really solutionize this and ensure the whole team are really bought in. Your CS team won't be happy if you're just chasing non-ICP the whole time, because you're just willing to win anything. And you've got to really ensure that you continue to evolve through what you're learning, and the best place to learn is your customers.
Yeah, such a good point. And that selling to innovators and then selling to pragmatists or the mass market, I think is where a lot of companies end up stalling. That kind of crossing the chasm, as it were, it's not easy. And pivots are definitely needed along that way to successfully cross it. I think one of those key pivots is around ICP and messaging, isn't it? As they move from early adopters to mainstream buyers. How do you think startups should be refining that and thinking about the frequency of like reviewing and refining that as they move from those early adopters to those mainstream buyers?
So for me, it's always been, okay, so what are the kind of top vertical sectors, right? At Jacquard, it was retail and travel, to be honest, in the main. Marketers who are sending out messaging to mass consumers, mailing lists of millions of people. So quite quickly we understood, okay, so what are in retail, it looks like this. When they've got these sorts of audience sizes, they get these kind of results. When they have these sorts of audience sizes, they really don't get as much. Like, they're not willing to spend as much on us because they don't see the ROI. We can't deliver the levels of ROI. Same with, then we start doing that for travel and so on. I'm really sort of tearing out what that ICP looks like. And that takes time. As I say, early stages, I joined the business when we were like 500,000 in ARR or something. And it was, who wants to buy it? Which brand marketers are willing to put their money into this and work with us and help us hone and refine what we're doing and understand how this is going to work for them. And that learning and iterative process was just so key, being so close to the customer to understand what they like, what they don't like, what they'd like to see, how this could be different when you consider they're doing this across sending messages on email versus Facebook advertising versus SMS or app messaging. And so, you really start kind of getting to understand that life cycle in a completely different way through the customer lens. And that's just so critical to help you then start understand, okay, here's now how we hone down our ICP. Do you know what? We shouldn't be positioning this in front of retail brands who have audiences of less than 5 million, because they're not going to see the return on investment. That's that, like, focus here. And I think that's the key bit as you get out of that early innovation into that mainstream, because you're going, we clearly understand and we can clearly articulate to retailers with an audience of more than 5 million why and how this is going to transform the way they send their marketing messages. And we can confidently attest to it because we've got the proof points, we've got the value, we've got the customer stories. We understand explicitly the problem that you're solving for. And we're not trying to be everything to everyone. We're really honing in on knowing who you are, what you care about, and how we play within that to make you and us successful. And I think that's an evolution. We've just gone through a similar thing in Autogen AI. We're very clear on the vertical sectors that we're into, but also we really work with people who are doing quite complex bid and proposal writing. They have to be able to evidence and put really high quality submissions. You can't take a question in a government bid and interpret it in the way that you want to. You have to take it as literal and give a literal response. And so there's just things like that as the kind of products evolved and we've evolved and we've understood better what success looks like. And that's a journey. And I think it's one that you go on from those early adopters through to that middle piece, and then obviously beyond. Once you get past that, and you're headed now for the 50 million, you're going to continue to learn and evolve and hopefully keep that refinement quite tight.
And you touched on Autogen there. I'd love to just step back a moment for anyone who's maybe not been tracking Autogen's rise, because the pace at which you've moved is pretty extraordinary. Can you maybe just introduce how the journey has unfolded since you joined?
I joined the business in January 24, and just straight away, as soon as I met Autogen, I just really understood the value proposition. Obviously, another AI company, that was absolutely going to be what I was going to go to for the next role, but just saw very clearly this solves a real problem. This is something that has very clear entry into markets all over the world. There's not a single country on the planet that doesn't have to bid for work it doesn't have bidding for work in some way. And really meeting Sean and how ambitious he is, and the goals he has for this business, and he's a second time founder. It was just an absolute no-brainer for me to come in, and really that journey has been very fast. in the last couple of years, this has been a very, very high growth business. The journey as I joined was really moving out of that founder-led sales. I've spent the last 6 months, a lot of time in New York, and we'll be spending much more time out there next year as we really continue to build on this journey that we're on at the moment.
It's an amazing journey. And I think your Series B came something like 4 months after your Series A, which I think is a testament to the interest in the business by investors, but also the rate of growth that you are seeing. But obviously, you've got more experience than most of selling AI into the enterprise, because obviously it's not just Autogen, but Phrasee as well. And I think AI in enterprise is kind of moved from excitement to fear to probably now pragmatism. And you've kind of lived that cycle quite early. How did you take an AI product into markets that are kind of hesitant, or companies that are hesitant and kind of don't really know how to deploy it? What actually works when you're doing this into the enterprise? I'm sure lots of people are wondering that.
Yeah, absolutely. The launch of Autogen AI coincided quite closely with the launch of ChatGPT. So we're in a different world now, where compared to where I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, everybody knows AI can read and write. So we sort of benefited from those early adopters, like you say, and then really trying to build that out and get that credibility in the space. So similar to Phrasee, Autogen AI benefited from early adopters, and one of those was a very large organization called Serco, who were also willing to go public with that story. So we've got that big flagship case study and proof point, which really gives us that credibility as we go into the market. So again, that kind of helps us swoop up a lot of those who are sort of early stages and going, yeah, this is great, I really get it. We're at kind of a different impasse now, right? And we spend a lot of time on education and really helping organizations understand how this really does change what they do today, because it is a change management piece. It absolutely is. And I think one of the things that is really striking, across the whole plethora of AI is people are quite confused. There is generalist AI that can do generalist things that we're all using, all of us are using, ChatGPT and getting recipes or writing stories or whatever. And then you've got sort of really specialized precision tooling, which is what the category that Autogen AI would sit in, that is solving a specific problem and focusing on a specific value piece. And then you've sort of got everything in between. And I think people are a little bit challenged on, where that falls and how come generalist tooling can't do precision tooling. Well, of course it can't. Sean always does a brilliant anecdote of, you don't use an electric toothbrush to hammer in a nail, right? Like or an electric drill. Like it's a totally different thing. You need precision tooling for precision tasks. And I think that one of the big things that we're seeing with AI in particular, and the sort of transformation in the enterprise, is it's kind of getting parked in IT and going, roll it out as an IT project. It's not an IT project. It's a transformation of an organization completely. And I think that we're kind of going, oh, well, we've got Microsoft Copilot, so we've sort of done AI. And it's, no, you're still going to have specific areas where you've got to focus in and have, these specialist tools. And we've spent a lot of time, and our Chief Customer Officer, Elle Salisbury, she's done a phenomenal job of really building out a customer organization within Autogen AI that's so focused on change management, and particularly for the enterprise, to really take them on that journey. It's a business leader led, orchestration, not a IT project that may or may not get touched and get the right attention it deserves. And there's a lot of learning that has to go into knowing how to do these things well. And, at the core, it's all about educating people and bringing people on that journey. And a lot of people are averse to technology, but it's only the same way that, we use Google and everybody was terrified of Google, and decades ago. Now we don't even think about it. We thought Excel was going to take away all the accountants. It didn't. It just gave them a tool to use to make the job more efficient. And I think that's the key thing with, particularly in the enterprise, is looking at where they can have specialist tools that help them do specialist tasks that are core to running their business.
And you mentioned earlier just now the outbound BDRs and who they're targeting. And I know that a lot of businesses have moved away from kind of heavy outbound and dedicated outbound BDRs, but you seem to have lent into that at Autogen. So maybe how has your outbound focused BDR model evolved, and what have you learned from sticking to it?
Yeah, we have a wonderful team of BDRs. They'll be glad I've said that if they listen to this, but they really are. So yeah, we've lent very heavily in, and I think it's a byproduct of our position, our kind of technology, and who we're targeting. So we're not targeting, personas who wouldn't get outreach from other organizations, of course. As I said, they're chief growth officers, they're running business development teams and pursuit teams. But I think it's as somebody who's come from the world of marketing technology that is so saturated, and, you're trying everything to get your BDRs to be able to outbound and, etc. Here, we've been able to really lean heavily into that model. And that has been, good old fashioned picking up the phone and having a conversation. And that's where the vast majority of our outbound connects and opportunities come from. And we've spent a lot of time ensuring that we're doing the right things around upskilling the BDRs to do that, and seeing that they can be successful and handle those qualifications and have the right sort of ability to turn a conversation around, and introducing a concept like ours to some who maybe, really are untrusting of AI in this space or what have you. So we've lent very heavily into that, and it's been working really very well for us. And now we're looking at different ways of how can we utilize that same model to sort of help us as we go further up the progression of the pipeline as well, and thinking about different interesting ways we could do that. And, with our BDRs, it's been really important for me that we can bring BDRs in and really put them on a pathway to progression, so we kind of bring them in either at graduate level or if they've had a completely different career experience. I mean, two of my top performing BDRs in the UK, one was a maths teacher and one was a theatre director, and they're phenomenal. So been really, really open-minded, maybe in a way that I wasn't previously, because I'm not kind of looking at it as traditional SaaS, because it's not. It is software as a service, but it's kind of a new proposition, and it's a new way, and it's a new world in the face of AI. So, been very, very open-minded to different experiences that people can bring and how that can make them successful.
That's so fascinating because, I host these dinners every month, of course. And what's become a bit of a trend over the last 6 months, I would say, is the number of revenue leaders that have let their BDR teams go, that just don't do outbound anymore. And they're trying to equip really the AEs to do their own self-sourcing, basically with better tooling and AI-driven SDR type stuff. What do you think's enabled you to be so successful? What are the key ingredients of that success with the BDR? Is it just picking up the phone?
I think it's been a bit of a combination. Like, honestly, in my early days at Autogen, I knew that, we had a couple of BDRs in the team at that point, and I was like, look, we can really create something quite special here by leaning into Outbound. And I thought, well, let's give it a go. Let's go all in and let's see what kind of results we get, because we need the leads. We want the opportunities coming in, but let's ensure that we can, just get a really clear plan in place to develop people and kind of get those skills in but let's act fast on stuff, let's get a clear performance management metrics in place, and let's get really clear about how we coach and that kind of program that will put people through. And yeah, it's pick up the phone, it's go through LinkedIn, go to events and network, and we pretty much just use email to confirm meetings and send information. We're not really using it as a prospecting piece at all. Of course, we have it, but it's a very small part of what we're doing. That success on the phone, and we're always focusing on, okay, how can we improve that connect rate? How can we improve that conversion from that first phone call into a discovery call, and all those things, and how can we just make these small optimizations through each step to ensure that every time we get a meeting, and we've gone through our phases of quality versus quantity, and what does that look like, and how do we ensure that that's doing all the right things for us. And we've evolved, obviously. Early last year, it was let's talk to everybody that we can possibly talk to, get those meetings, to now it's like we know exactly who we should be talking to. We know exactly what they need to be doing so that we know they can be successful with us. Let's really hone in on that. And so, we've gone through a huge evolution in that space, but the one constant has been we pick up the phone.
Wow. We're obviously at this fascinating moment where AI isn't kind of replacing revenue teams. And you talked about this earlier, but just touched on the fact that you don't think it will replace headcount, but it's absolutely rewriting the job description. How have you seen AI change how revenue teams are operating or even being built day to day? Yeah, what are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So massive efficiency gains, right? Being able to, pull together research on an account, help craft a first email or a second, or, whatever it might be. Live coaching as well. We've recently implemented Glyphic, and we're already just seeing such great value and impact from that. And everybody's obsessing over their scorecards and what could I do differently, and how could this be, and getting that sort of in real time coaching, and because we spend so much time on the phone, we're getting so much value there. So yeah, being able to just sometimes I feel so ancient when I tell stories to our BDR team about how my first BDR role was, I'd have a big pad of paper and a book of phone numbers that I would work my way through, and I'd keep a little tally on top every time I spoke to somebody or booked a meeting. And they looked at me like I had three heads, because they're just what? I just type this into here and it gives me all this information. And, we can use our own tool for that too. We get to drink our own champagne. We have great sort of research assistant and pieces through our tooling in Autogen AI. So yeah, obviously AI is ingrained in us at Autogen, and using our tool, and then being able to work with tools like Glyphic to help us get even smarter and more efficient, and is fantastic. But that account research piece for me is just brilliant. I love that ability to just be able to boom, no more trying to read through financial reports and looking at these huge decks and these enterprises of what are their focuses and where is the organization going. You just get it in a snap, and it's just so transformational. And I think that's where it's gonna go. I'm not convinced by the AESDR piece at all yet, but maybe in time. But certainly, that efficiency piece and that planning and research is really key.
Given you just said that, you might have a very short answer to this question, but it's something that's come up at Pavilion dinners a few times. And how do you think CROs should be thinking about budgeting and headcount planning for the next couple of years in this AI era? What efficiencies or assumptions do you think we should be baking into our models? Well, actually, is it too early for that? Should we just be doing our headcount planning and our budgeting exactly as if everything is the same? Or when should we be thinking about, okay, well, actually, I can expect more from these people, or I should maybe don't need to hire as many of these people? What's your thoughts on budgeting and headcount planning?
Yeah, so I think from a headcount perspective, I probably personally I wouldn't be changing much as to what I'm doing today, outside of potentially growing that team rather than scaling back. Where I do think though, and I'm in this process, kind of right now, is around how many tools we might need. And having lots of different tools when there are things now that we can utilize that are, AI first tooling that could actually reduce some of that tech stack piece down, which would be great. So, I think there's probably things like that I'm more looking about versus headcount as we stand today. I think my expectation around what somebody can deliver probably increases because they've got the AI tooling with them versus kind of looking at the AI to replace that as a head. So I might expect they'd be able to achieve more against targets.
So will you increase targets as a result of that? Like, how are you thinking about those productivity gains?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Okay. Good to hear.
The team will be screaming when they hear this.
Yeah. It's coming, team. It's coming. We don't know when, but it's coming. As soon as we start investing more in AI tools.
Yeah, it's coming.
Well, listen, let's talk quickly. I know we've not got a huge amount of time left, but let's talk quickly about hiring that first revenue leader into a business, because you've been that kind of, you've managed that founder-led transition twice now. You've been that first revenue leader. But I think so many founders get burnt when they hire that first leader. We see it the whole time at Scalewise. What lessons would you share for founders that are hiring their first go-to-market or revenue leader during that 1 to 10 million phase, perhaps when they're transitioning from founder-led selling? What would be the big tips that you would give them?
Yeah. So I think, really define very clearly the kind of role that you want filled. I think that if I take my experience at Phrasey, I joined sort of, very early stages. There was no head of sales or no VP sales. It was just like come in and just sell, and the role will sort of evolve and grow. And that's exactly what happened. And, and that was fantastic. Here, I've come in at the level that I kind of left Phrasey at and et cetera. But if you're looking for somebody who you still want to be able to sell, kind of hire people, still be on that front line, if you're bringing in a sales leader that hasn't sold and has been a manager of managers and managers the last 15 years, no matter how much they probably tell you, oh, I'm willing to roll my sleeves up and get on, they're probably not in reality. So you're going to have a shock. Both of you are going to have a shock really quite quickly. And I think this is where, it's people who are real builders, I think you need at that phase. And hopefully those people can build and then move on to that next phase with you. And, because then you're going into how can we create repeatability and scalability and all those things. But really early, like that 1 million, you've been doing that as a founder. Then you now need to bring somebody in who can grow your team with you, but you need them selling because they need to fundamentally understand how to sell this, where the ICP needs to go, what that needs to look like, to know even who to bring in. So I think that is like really, really big. Like you've got to make sure that you are not hiring, at a level that just isn't going to be what you need it to be. I think, you've got to have people who are going to be really adaptable as well. And you've got to really test and hire for that. We know what this journey's like. One day you're going, we're using this price and we're focusing over here. And then 2 weeks later, you might be going, God, that price, what did we do? We've got to pivot all the way over here now, or we've got to change our product position. All these things can evolve so quickly that you need to have people who can learn, adjust, not just those people who've big, stable environments where nothing changes and it's just, this is how it's done and it stays how it's done. And I think as well, you've just got to be really honest about the journey. I think that startups can look so glamorous from the outside and they're a lot of fun, but it's tough. The pressure, the pace, the pivots that you have to take, like you've got to find those people who are really going to thrive in that at every step and not ones who are going to be freaked out because you've had to scale back on a decision that you thought was right, or, take a whole different direction into a market or whatever it might be. And I think you've got to be really upfront and honest on that. It's not as glamorous as it looks.
No, it definitely isn't. And what about on the flip side? What advice would you give to aspiring CROs? What skills do you think will matter most in 2026 and beyond for people that are trying to move into that CRO role?
Yeah, so I think into the CRO role, know your numbers, get close to your CFO, like really make sure that that is A, a good relationship, and B, you are going to be accountable for numbers in a way that you don't have when you're, head of sales, VP, whatever. You've really got to think about that. I think the same comes with really being able to broaden your remit. You're not just responsible for new business sales. Now, you have to think about the whole orchestration cross-functionally, product, marketing, CS, ops, like finance, like you cover everything. You're involved with everyone. You're not doing new business sales. You're leading out on go-to-market. There's a lot of expectation there about what you can influence and how you should be doing that and knowing all your stakeholders. So I think they're like really key things that people need to think about. And certainly if you're in early stage, like demonstrating that you can go from scrappy to structure. You can't always live in the chaos. The chaos does need to move on. And I think being able to demonstrate you can hire people, you can put scaling programs in for people, you can performance manage, you can take those tough decisions when the time comes. And, you're kind of building out to the C-suite being your first team, not your sales team.
As we wrap up the show, if you could change one thing about the startup ecosystem, what would that one thing be and why?
I think kind of the whole startup hustle culture, it's very focused on speed, like do everything really, really fast, which is great. But I think it's all about that kind of, if you've got a product that genuinely solves a problem, if you've got customers that are sticking with you, you've got teams that can cope with the pace of how things are working, that kind of sustainable customer-driven value growth is the key outside of like vanity metrics, right? Like, so I think if that was more the focus, and it's all very fast paced, but if that was more the focus, I think we'd have probably fewer broken startups, fewer broken founders, and fewer kind of burnt out teams. It's that kind of ability to maybe realize when you've got to take a pause, take a breath, and move a little bit more deliberately in a direction that makes more sense. A bit more moving with intent rather than just moving for speed's sake.
And get rid of those vanity metrics, as you say, and focus on the things that are actually going to create a sustainable, durable business. I think sometimes people chase top line growth and take their eye off the ball of some of the fundamental unit economics of a business. So I'm so glad you drew that out. Natalie, this has been brilliant. You've given such honest, practical insight. I think exactly what founders and revenue leaders on that kind of 2 to 10 million journey need. Thank you for being so open and just for bringing the same generosity that you bring to every pavilion engagement and dinner that we've had together, and even saunas in Sweden. I really can't wait to keep following your journey at Autogen. I'm sure we'll have many more dinners along the way. And thanks again for joining us on Making the Grade. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to Making the Grade. If today's episode gave you something to think about, or perhaps something you're going to act on, we'd love to hear from you. Please can you share any feedback, questions, or guest recommendations by emailing us at podcast@scalewise.com. And if you're enjoying Making the Grade, please do consider leaving us a review on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Reviews make a huge difference in helping the show reach more founders and operators navigating this stage of growth. You'll find links, resources, and key takeaways from today's episode in the show notes, plus even more exclusive podcast content on our YouTube channel. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon for another episode of Making the Grade.